Starting live.
So we can go through the, okay, if you want us to do the slideshow,
Good morning.
we can do that super quick. I tried to slip up, I didn't know if you were doing that.
Good morning.
Morning, counselors. How are you?
Just great. Thanks.
Great.
How are you, sir?
We're going to go and get started. So
Okay.
mics will go live. You know, it's interesting. I don't think we have a chair to these subcommittees. Rob and I were just talking. So
What's that?
we don't have a chair for these subcommittees as far as.
Oh, yeah, I know.
So I'll just facilitate if that works for everybody. Just to keep
Fine.
Works for us.
All right, so we're ready. So, okay. So we'll get the August 24th, 2022 City Council Community Building Subcommittee meeting underway. Let's do a roll call first. So Councilor Campbell,
I am here.
Councilor Stahl,
Present.
and then Councilor Broadman. Filling in for Councilor Keebler. Yep. All right, thank you. See, so if anyone's watching, I'm Russ Grace. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for the city, and I'll just kind of facilitate this meeting. The first item is approval of the April 27th, 2022 meeting minutes.
Move to approve.
Any comments? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, that was easy. What? Okay. Is there anyone here for public comment? Either we don't have anybody in council chambers, Robin. All right, then we will just keep going. So we only have one item on for today's discussion, and it's around key routes. So this is really intended to be a very informal, open discussion on this topic. So we've got all the experts in the room. They can help answer all the questions. I'll just kind of frame things for you. There will be a couple questions at the end of this for you that I'll frame up, just to be thinking through as we go through this. But what we'd like to do is just offer an opportunity for council to, as a follow-up to the presentation that was done at the last council meeting on the key routes. If you have any questions, we just want to make sure there's a lot of terminology and vernacular that we're using and acronyms and all that. So if you have any questions around this, the experts are sitting at the table here to answer that. And then we thought what we would do would be, we actually went on a bike ride yesterday, and Councilor Broadman joined us. It was fantastic. It was these fine three people, and I'll have them introduce themselves in a second, as well as Eric and myself. And we had a couple others, I think, with us for part of the ride too, Sinclair. And it was a really good exercise. We kind of went around the core area of town. We went up 6th Street, went down 9th Street, try to find ways to get from Wilson back over towards kind of the core, like the Core Pine area and Crux. And then we looked at connections heading kind of east-west. So it was a really good exercise because you really start to understand where the pinch points are and what the stress levels of different situations are, especially when you have the experts with you that know the system inside and out. So we can have some reflections on that. And then we thought we would walk through the north-south route. There are a couple changes that we're looking at. Then we're going to briefly go over what we're thinking on the east-west route. And really the key takeaways are when we come back to council with any further action on this, it will really be at contract. When we have a contract out to get consultants on. So there's a couple things that we'll be asking. One is we've been holding on the Greenway Phase 4 project, which is some Greenway work in the core of town for the Midtown crossing discussion to carry through to figure out which crossing we're going to go out. And I can have Ryan talk about this once we get there. We're thinking of maybe advancing that now and getting that moving because there's some key route connections that go through the greenways that we'd like to get on the ground by this time next year. Also, we'll talk about pulling some potential bond work forward as well on 15th and 9th Street instead of waiting to kind of do that in concert with the Reed Market project. Again, in the goal of getting the key routes moving. And then we want to have a discussion around wayfinding. And maybe going out for additional contract for that and what that might look like. Also, the team can provide you with an update of what we're going to try to get accomplished within the next 12 months. So like this time next year, what do we think we can get? And then what's kind of the 2 to 3 year window look like and beyond that, just to give you a sense of how all this might come together. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, have him just kind of go through some of the highlights of the tour, and then also kind of go through some of the mapping exercises. And also, I guess, why don't we start with it? Was there any questions from the last council meeting that you would like us to dive in further before we start going through this, just to provide more clarity on something?
I don't have any questions.
Nope.
Can't think of any. Thank you.
All right, then Ryan, you want to?
We had to start with that.
We did.
So thank you, committee. Happy to be here today. And like Russ said, this is really spending some time digging into the weeds and identifying specific areas where we think we can get some improvements done. Ultimately reaching that goal of council to have a complete east-south and a complete north-east-south, north-south and east-west connection. So yeah, I think since Janet's got it queued up, we'll kind of start with some of the highlights from the ride yesterday. And then all three of us have different versions of maps and pictures and other stuff. So there may be some transition in between stuff as we go here, but we'll go ahead and let Janet and Robin start with some of the highlights from yesterday.
And they're kind of in order of our tour, but a little bit jumped around, and tried to highlight a few of the things that we need to solve as part of our like more detailed review. But the focus today is just kind of, as Russ was saying, and Ryan, on the route, are you kind of in line with these are the good routes to pick, and we'll go from there. So this spot in Juniper Park, in the background, you can see a little bit of an asphalt trail behind Ryan there, over here coming in. And this would be a good example of where, while we have a connected facility in this area, the trail kind of comes to a sidewalk. You're at an intersection. So this is where we'll be talking about wayfinding a little bit. Will be important because there's not a visual, like the asphalt path doesn't continue through to create an obvious route of like, this is where you go.
We don't need to do that.
There we go. So then now we took a little detour down the 6th Street Greenway to show kind of a little reminder for our success of what it looks like. This is ODOT after kind of got delayed a little bit, but was able to install the enhanced RFB crossing of Greenwood. So we've got buttons that you can see someone pushing in the air that's designed so that a bike can stay on and push the button and get across. So this is the Greenway. There's speed humps, and Robin and Ryan jump in if there's something I'm missing. This is just an example there. So we're marking crosswalks on the Greenway because while it's a low stress bike route, we're also trying to serve pedestrians where we can and have both modes, make it low stress for both modes. This is a discussion point that may come back at some point of, as we're trying to facilitate making the greenways and our low stress routes more comfortable, it will, in some cases, spark a discussion about how does vehicle traffic use that road. And in the case of like 6th Street, there may be an opportunity to direct vehicle traffic to use 4th and 8th, the collectors, and less cut through traffic on 6th with perhaps a median or modal filter. So in this, you see this would be an example of, and we'd have some discussion on a policy to do this, whether you wanted to restrict movements so that there'd be a gap for the people walking and biking, but the vehicles would have to use the collector street.
I think we have a qualitative example of after that crossing when it's 6th Street and Greenwood. I think, Robin, you were saying the traffic going down 6th feels like it's dropped off because of just that doing those turn restrictions. So don't have quantitative data about that, but definitely feels like it.
Airs are no longer there, Midtown Market, but some more Sharrows and an example of the street. We have a few options on how to route the east-west route through, and this would be one example of, currently we could come down Hawthorne and work through with Parks and Rec on a variety of ways through the site to connect to Hawthorne. But a unique opportunity maybe there's this platted alley that is undeveloped south of Irving, between Irving and Hawthorne, that could be an opportunity to have a more direct path. So these are the kind of things we'll look at. And here's an example of, is what it looks like today. There's some, not without challenges, right? There's some rocks and work that would need to be done, but it's partially improved on that.
And
So
where's that, near Sixth
it's just
Northeast?
north of the rec center. As you're walking out, you don't even notice it.
You want to go back to the map?
Yeah, we were, when Janet and Robin pointed this out, we were like, all of us, right? We had no idea that was there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have the benefit. Robin has been working on bike stuff in our community for 22
22
I won't
years.
say it out loud, because it's 22 years now, right? So has scouted out all these little like options.
Yeah,
So,
sure. Great.
so it's the yellow line here.
Yeah, got it.
And we will, Robin also had an amazing opportunity over the summer to go to Copenhagen and
Yeah, I spent a month traveling with the University of Oregon class on sustainable transportation. So we did 2 weeks in Denmark and 2 weeks in.
specifically on bike ped infrastructure.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And she got a grant for it. It was, yeah, it was
That's great.
great information.
And I'll just piggyback on that a little bit in that I think one of the I'm speaking for you,
Yeah.
but one of the lessons was that, yes, they do things that way, but it's Robin spent a lot of time asking questions to like, we are a little bit different. So how can we apply that here?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot I think that can transfer over. That's just a small nudge.
This is just the other side of that. So you wouldn't notice it, Barb, because it looks like it's just a driveway to their lot, but it's
that?
platted right away.
Yeah. Cool.
And then this is another example of if the route were to go through the park property, you can't, on the other side, there's a path and you come from a path, but you can't really tell this is a route. So with wayfinding signs or even some changed materials, we could do that. Then we jump over a little bit, 2 screens, but to 9th Street. So the north-south route that I think most of you were in previous discussions, kind of where we went through, where Ryan went through the north-south and east-west route. So comes along 15th on the path. And then the bond project is on 9th to improve 9th Street. So we've got some options to maybe do some restriping, because we don't have funds to reconstruct the street with shared use paths on both sides. So this was just a picture showing trucks in the center lane. If we've got 12-foot lanes, our standards are now 11. Do we have some opportunities to restripe to get a buffer?
Could I ask a random question that just popped into my head?
Yeah.
The new ballers, well, they're new to me, on Portland. How do those work? Are they attached to the street? Do they just have water or sand in them or something?
Empty plastic that's attached to the street on a flexible post. You can see they've taken a little bit of a hit the last month or so.
And then we also went to, she might show it on Wilson. We looked at the different type of barricades that are protections that Ryan's team has been looking at, and we were able to actually talk through some options and what the preferred option is.
Thank you.
But on Portland, what are those, not to deviate too much, what's the idea behind those white flexi posts?
So those were part of the whole corridor at the time. The reconstruction project was off in the future, and we were looking at, knowing Newport was coming, also can we make some short-term improvements, low-cost, quick signing striping improvements to the corridor. And some of the concerns were people walking across the street. And so as much as speed, so the two of those paired together, creating curb extensions, those are temporary curb extensions to narrow the visual corridor, and then provide a spot for pedestrians to queue out in the street. So here's kind of, almost can see on the bottom here, 9th Street. We're talking about 9th Street a little bit. So the key route comes up 9th Street, and then just off the bottom of my map where I just moved the screen is Glenwood. Glenwood. And the route actually goes along Glenwood, up 5th, back Alder, back to 6th to get on 6th Street, right? So that's kind of the way the streets are now, with the high school and the right-of-way. The opportunity we're looking at is maybe we provide a more direct route on 9th to get to Franklin and 6th and the Greenway. So those are the kind of things that we still are looking to resolve, again, with the aim of how do we make it a easily identified, connected, separate as possible route for people.
Which something, if you don't mind, Janet, that
Oh, yeah.
we all noticed in writing this portion that's highlighted in green here. It does have a continual of that 3-lane section where you have a travel lane in each way and then a center turn lane. But there's a lot fewer driveways. Yeah, this is kind of where the transition is. If you continue south here, you start to hit the commercial area and there's side streets and driveways and a whole bunch of stuff. So the turn lane is kind of needed to make sure that we don't back up the travel lane. But if you go north of this, if you're facing the other direction, there are not many driveway approaches. There's the church entrance and then the entrance to Bend High School. Other than that, there's really no need for the turn lane. So we think there's really good options on 9th Street instead of having to do that button hook on Glenwood and Alden. We could do kind of a road diet version through there, maintaining some turning options for those who need it. But you know, there's a sea of asphalt out there that's rarely used for anything. So we can look at some options to narrow that down.
And you'll hear, right, we're trying to focus on getting the north, south, east, west main route. And you'll see as we carry on with our discussion, that doesn't mean there's not going to be other options and that people aren't going to choose other options. And that as we expand the system, we can provide better information on how they can get that way. So if someone's not comfortable riding on 9th in the quick build state that it'll be in, there's still that option to go down Glenwood and 5th and connect through. So
Yeah, and I think when you think about wayfinding, we're going to focus on like the hub of the network, which is the north, south, east, west route. And then it's going to have kind of spokes that can get to all these other areas right now. And then we'll just continue to build on that as these other systems come online. But for me, we've got a lot of really good infrastructure out there now that we should get credit for and get people to make sure they know how to get there. Because we're talking everybody has their own route and ways, but whether you're local and you ride it every day or you're just out there for the first time, let's get everybody aware of where the key routes are and where they can get to off of them through some simple wayfinding. Sorry, Robin.
So just so you can visualize what one of the options is for this 9th Street between Franklin and Glenwood, north of the Franklin roundabout, the Bear roundabout, adjacent to Juniper Park, that segment up to Greenwood, that is 2 lanes. And so it kind of has this opportunity to add buffers and then just continue it to serve the high school with that same treatment.
So the decision the team's going to be making is, yep, we know we want to get from 9th Street to the south to 6th Street north of Greenwood.
Yeah, so connecting the green line somehow is
And
the idea.
so trying to figure out, and that's what staff's going to do is figure out how to get through there. But we just want to let council know these are kind of some of the elements that we look at in making those decisions.
So after we were on that stretch yesterday, I was thinking more about it and obviously defer to the experts, but it does seem like south of the high school, it's going to be a ton of work to ever get that to a point where a kid's going to be comfortable on it. And so I think it's important to have some improvements on 9th, but I wonder if getting people over to Coiner and spending, because we're going to spend a lot of resources, I think, on raising the level of service on 9th.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there's an opportunity to do some sort of transitions over to Coiner and use that as the route down to Wilson. Well, I don't want to give up on 9th because Wilson. But I also think Coiner's there. It's really heavily used. And maybe we can work with BPRD on getting that transition up because I think kids are more likely to ride on Coiner.
Yeah, and honestly, that's
and you can get there.
you can get there.
You just
right?
don't know, like from the roundabout, it
Right.
comes right
It can-
there, but
yeah.
it's kind of tucked away if you don't know. So that,
Right.
yes, that's
So-
definitely an opportunity.
And I also I don't want to slow. One of the things when we were out there yesterday, we were watching all these, this is a heavily used job area, industrial area. We have to make sure that whatever we're doing is conducive to the use of the existing sort of feel of the spot. That doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like you're on the Coiner Trail. The Coiner Trail feels really nice.
Yeah, it goes a little out of direction. So
Yeah.
we need both.
Probably need both, but I don't know that kids and people who were
Right.
a lot of this is like trying to get the person who's not riding today to feel comfortable. And I think if I'm introducing somebody to hey, you can go to Juniper today for your workout class by bike and it's totally safe. To get them to make that choice, I don't know that we're ever going to
Yeah.
get that industrial stretch of Ninth to be that level of service. We might.
Yeah, and I think this might be, if we just pause, this is an interesting conversation, is making sure when we say key routes, from council's perspective, who are we designing the system for? And because I think that'll lead to a lot of the decision points. And yeah, and we still have 9th Street in theory, if you want to hypothetically like use corner, but we will still have wayfinding to 9th Street and mark that as a kind of a different type of route. But in terms of like this north, south, east, west, what does council view as kind of their vision of what they want this first north, south, east, west route to feel like for the community?
And so right now, just to put it in context, if you look at the descriptives in the TSP, project R1B, which is 9th Street from Wilson Avenue to Glenwood, because then once you hit Glenwood, that's when the Greenways money kicks in. But the GEO bond money from 9th from Wilson to Glenwood projected a cost of $3,000. So it's basically striping.
Nothing. Yeah.
That's all it's budgeted to do right now. And that's what is programmed on the Wilson project that Sinclair is running right now, is we were just going to restripe that.
Right.
And try to make it a little safer. But there's nothing in there in the hundreds of thousands of dollars of area to do anything dramatic.
We're never going to get, like, at that rate of spend, we're never going to get it to a level where a new user is going to choose to use it.
Right.
And you're talking probably millions of dollars if you were going to try to actually put like an off-system trail through there, I think, because you're climbing right away and there's a lot of things in the way. So.
But we do have,
Yeah.
it's granted, it's not just for this portion. Greenways Phase 4 has just under $1 million. And this is a piece of it. So instead of Glenwood, Alden up 6th, we could transfer some of that over to 9th. But again, we got to evaluate what that cost impact will be.
Yeah. And that industrial area, I think we were talking about it a little bit yesterday. Certain times of day and evenings and weekends, there's nobody out there because it is an industrial job center. And so they leave work at 4. And so it's pretty nice for a lot of people to get down to like Bevel Brewing and 9th Street Village there, and even up to the park on weekends. So I think having the two options, because Larkspur and Coiner already exist.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're down at 15th Street at the roundabout, we can easily get people onto the Larkspur Trail, and then we can get them to the Coiner Trail through a new development. So we can get them to the same roundabout with the bear.
Mm-hmm.
It's 2 different routes.
I think the greatest opportunity is with kids. It's kids, kids, kids. We all know that our worst traffic congestion problems in this city are associated with the schools. It's people driving their kids to school for whatever reason. And I also happen to think that simultaneously, we have a city with a whole lot of really fit people who, are really here to live the dream and be outside and, get exercise. And if we can get those kids into these behaviors, we can change them for the rest of their lives, get people to realize that biking to work is a fun alternative. It's not just healthy and cheap, but you can actually enjoy part of your day that used to just be cursing in traffic. But, obviously that kind of network is what requires the very most in infrastructure to keep those kids safe and for them to feel comfortable. And so with that, I will tell you, this whole key route thing, I have been a little confused about all, you know what I mean? Robin knows this very well. I got elected because of greenways, it was 9 years ago when I learned about the existence of neighborhood greenways and what was happening to me in Portland when I was on these streets and I felt like I'm in the wrong place and maybe I shouldn't be here at all. And then I had to turn right. And finally, my brother explains to me, oh, well, this is what this is. And it's genius. And, really, that was it for me, was not just all these things are bad and wrong, but I know what I want to happen, and that for me was what really made the difference of running for council, right? But these key routes are feeling more to me like our bike superhighways. This is where actual, adult commuters are going to be able to cover miles, honestly be able to get north, south, and east, west through town. And, I don't think I'm saying anything that anybody's not feeling as far as what is the difference between these things? How do they work together? Where is our opportunity for those classic greenway design where it's a residential street and the residents will be just thrilled if cars have trouble getting through, as long as they can get to their own driveway, and kids are, and then again, this idea that there are other people that, really will go across town if they could do it. And, so there you go. There's my thoughts on that question.
I think my main, at least what I look at this key route, is to create something where we're taking, like Barb said, as well as Anthony's, to take people off of out of their cars and onto these keypads. And that comes down to safety for me. And ninth, as much as I think, like Robin said, has times it can be safe. A lot of times when people are going to work, it's when it's busy on that ninth route. And so that gives me a lot of pause with the 9th Street for safety concerns. I think, like we've talked about, you can have both. You can have Coiner and you can have 9th going into the same type of route, right? But if our goal is to get people off this, with us growing as rapidly as we will be, and we are at this time, we need to take people that are moving here and show them that this is a safe route, not that it's going to be safe someday down the road when we have the money to change 9th Street like the way we'd like to, but it's safe today and not 10 years from now. So I guess my biggest thing is trying to take people out of their cars that are coming here that are new and making sure they're on bikes instead, because they are coming here to be fit. They are coming here to have a holistic life. And you know what? They have this mindset of coming here and having the ability to commute everywhere without the need of a car, because they want that lifestyle choice. That's why they're here. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. And I'll go back. We really need both, because you need that coverage and you need direct. But that's a big job center.
Mhm.
So we need to be able to get people to this industrial area so they can get to their job. And then their lunch breaks can get to the food carts and things like that from lunch. So it's nice to have the two side by side.
So that's going to be our challenge, right? So
Yeah.
I think I heard the answer of both, right?
Well,
And recognizing that we can't get to the ultimate right away, but that's the challenge to us is, if 9th Street we can restripe and that's the super highway for bikes, then how do we take these challenging sections and what is the answer? And is it shared use path for some section that we've got to figure out, or how maybe we have the reroute that's a little more circuitous, but it's on local streets for now? Is that?
But we're going to set and mark. I mean, we aren't going to hear back essentially as council until, I think you all are going to go out and set this route and then we're going to mark it.
Yeah.
So my expectation would be, if you're telling us the expense of connecting 9th Juniper to the Coiner Trail is not going to work until, for now, and we can't set that in market right now.
So we've got both.
Right, but we're not going to mark both as the north-south route.
Right. But this is a project here to get to Coiner this way. This is also a route to get to
Yeah.
Coiner this way. This high school, its boundary is primarily to the north.
Right.
So getting folks to this high school, but also to Coiner so that we can come down to 15th Street
Yeah.
and kind of bypass this little piece.
What I'm saying though is do you need more guidance from us on marking it on Coiner or marking it on 9th, or are you planning on marking it on both?
Yeah, we can go into that wayfinding. This is what we still need to develop kind of how we're going to do this, but I'm thinking this is the time where you go out and get you go get those creative people and the creative consultants. There are firms that do this for a living, because we want to look at the city holistically first and say, all right, what are we trying to do? How do we incorporate it into the bin trail system? What are we defining as areas of interest in town? Do we want to have signage to the hospital, to Galveston, to the Midtown area, downtown, the old mill? what do we want to try to sign? How, and what's the best way? They're more in the sociology and psychology of what moves people in the right way. And then after that, then we'll start to layer, then how does that work in a wayfinding system? And you can always use, like, we probably wouldn't use it here, but you always use the ski route, the ski run system of green, blue, black, right? There's some theming package you can do, and then have them go ahead and design in that first RFP, these two main routes, and maybe some ancillary things. Like if we know, the highways, 9th Street and corners, where kind of the low stress system is, okay, how do we do that? Let's get that design and get some examples out there that from the true experts, and then we can build on that. Let's get the theming put together, kind of the strategy of how this all going to work together jointly with our trails and the park system trails, and then get something on the ground by this time next year. In that effort, that's kind of the way I want to approach it. Is like, let's not just focus on the 2 key routes, but the city system as a whole, knowing where we are and where we want to
go. So tying that back, that your comments help us in that the answer is not just 9th. It is look at in this particular case, and you'll see it plays out in different aspects as we have our follow-up discussions. Because the reality is we're stuck with what we have, right? And we're trying to fit things in existing infrastructure, but we do, as Robin pointed out, have some opportunities, right? In this section, 9th Street, that might be our key route, but it's key route option A for the lower stress. And so your guidance today will help us go back and look so that we can mark full.
That's great. And for me, I mean, to answer your question, the who, right, is you should be able to place a kid at any point on this route and they can get to either terminus, all 3 other terminus.
Yes.
And they should be able to do it safely, or more safe than they can do it right now, because right now it's not safe.
And to put it, I think the great example of the conversation we were having yesterday was we were in the grid system of kind of downtown in the old Bend neighborhood, and we were on Delaware. And it's like, yeah, if you have if you're giving instructions to your kid of where to go, it's like, you stay on that key route, follow the signs. That is your safest way to get there. But we know, especially in the downtown area, people are going to splinter everywhere because they're going all different directions, which is completely fine. But we will have the main markings on these key routes to say, if you want to go to downtown, you want to go to the mill, or you want to go to the, get across the river, here, follow the signs. That's kind of what I thought that was a great example. And I agree with Councilor Broadman of, yeah, you're telling your child, you're going downtown, you're totally free to go downtown. Just make sure you stay on that marked route.
Right. A specific low stress route sounds to me like something that might be a tourism facility.
Yeah. Well, I'll use a personal example, right? We went into San Francisco, rented a couple of e-bikes because it's the best way to see a town. And the first thing you do is, can I get a map of where we want to go? And I was telling the team yesterday, there's a great example of, you're on a main system here, and then you need to transfer to a main system that may be like 5 streets over, and they branded it the Wiggle. And you go through like 20 turns through all these little local streets to get you from one main facility to another. But you always knew where you were, and you're just like, yep, follow the blue sign that says the Wiggle, and you get through it.
We've talked to Visit Bend about whether the Ale Trail as a physical tourism related facility could be used for that. And I think the answer is probably not what I would hope. But I think it's worth maybe having that conversation again.
Well, what about just specifically the wayfinding?
Right. No, that's what I mean. Like getting somebody from one brewery to another.
Get pushback on whether the actual pavement, the routes are tourism facility, but needing the signs that literally tell you where the Wiggle is and how to get through it, that I think making that case, that the sign specifically, because that's immediately where my brain is going is, oh, that's a lot of signs, that's a lot of money. Always when we're talking physical way signing, because that's exactly where I go. For me, it's San Francisco, but in my car, following the signs with the little seagull, with my nieces yelling, seagull on the right, seagull to the right, driving and just having the best afternoon, rainy afternoon in San Francisco. just something to do. Let's just follow the seagull route, whatever they call that there, you know, and it's 30 miles all the way around.
That's why you want to get those smart, creative people involved.
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, exactly. Oh, well, yeah, no, they're the smart creative. I'm the one thinking about where are we going to find the money to do this? Is it?
Well,
Benji's
of
where?
all-
That's where. We know where the money is.
Kind of as part of this project, right?
Right.
The wayfinding for the routes is also
Right.
figure out where people are going. So we talked about that yesterday, instead of like turn right to 10 Barrel or to Cafe Yum, you know, some of the existing signs we have, it would be like, here's this business district, here's
Uh-huh.
the library, the major destination. So it really is a project that can tie some of our other needs together.
Absolutely.
But
Just the walking tours of the historic district.
Yeah.
You know, make that a bike route that will, you know, something similar to that. You know, the expanded version of, I don't know what, but you know, that to me again, oh, that's visit money.
it's a lot of, Barb, it's a lot of signs, but you look at the hierarchy of infrastructure, you know, signing in stripage.
Oh,
that's,
yeah.
that's the easy part.
Absolutely. No, absolutely, Russ. But I just think over the years of different things that's like, oh, we need a sign, you know, oh, well, sure. Until all you need is a sign every 50 feet on both sides. And now you're talking real money. Yeah. Okay, great.
So back to your conversation about routes for all users, we do have some constraints that we're challenged to get around, and this would be Wilson corridor, right? So to get across Wilson corridor is the direct route to extend the great work we're doing with the Wilson corridor project to the old mill. We're limited with the bridge, what we can do here, and this actually great timing to show a picture of a truck. You know, there may be more space to do something to widen the bike lane, but even a buffered bike lane might not be something many people are comfortable with. So we've got the ANI project that's looking at alternatives, and there's other kind of workarounds that I think I have a couple pictures coming up next. This is just one we stopped to talk about the protected bike lane, two different types of
There's curbing, there's
Raised.
a metal curb in there.
yeah, you can't see it right there, kind of
Oh,
there's the metal curb here, and then the Dura curb, the two options that we tried out. So this is if you were not going to take Wilson, you would
This was
take the
terrifying.
path next to the highway, which is
No one felt safe on this section, I can tell you that.
Sample of 12.
so you
Zero.
start here attached to the highway, then it's detached, and it's a busy corridor now.
But even right there, I mean, just imagine you're riding into traffic and you're hearing the sounds. I mean, like I was thinking of having my daughter with me, you know, when she was a little, that would not be comfortable to have.
But the difference between this, like if that path were 20 feet to the left and there were some more physical barrier between the parkway and it'd be
Better.
Yeah.
And Truman would have to close, right? Yeah, and there's right of way, so the asphalt path could move.
And
I don't know, you're gonna get far enough to get that feeling,
Right.
but there, yeah.
There's not as many eyes on it.
And the tricky part, you know, it's like all these little things. It's actually how do you get off of Wilson onto that system? Right. That was actually the harder question than just how uncomfortable we felt riding right there.
So again, you know, we're doing lots of good things elsewhere. We'll figure out where we can. We still might have some pinch points, and we'll have to get creative with what we can do. This is the Crux, kind of an interim solution of the Crux bike path. This is going to take a different form of how bikes will get through here once it develops. But amazing facility now.
Sure can.
We'll have, after the pictures, we can bring the map up. There's some options to kind of get around this area with the ANI project that's in the Geo bond. So there may be some other ways up 2nd Street and some other things we can do to make that a friendly environment.
And I'll try and zip through these so we can get back to the map picture, but I think there's a couple more. So that shows kind of facility types. Here's where we have an opportunity. The path, which is actually a nicer path in this section, comes up to a fairly large, busy intersection of a highway ramp. And there's a crosswalk so if we're riding the bikes, right? So instead of coming straight across, which is kind of the path that you want to take, we cross Colorado. Arizona, and then Colorado here, and then the bike trails here. And so we have some work to get you on like the right route, so you're not going up the ped ramp and looping around here. And then, oh yeah, here's a picture where you can see it. So you have to kind of cross and then cross. But there's space and there's opportunity. Then Second Street. So this is the Second Street, jumping over to Second Street is a different version of 9th Street, right? And right now it's a through movement to get to 3rd Street and out of the box factory area. So it's a little higher volume. We have a project with the Wilson corridor that's going to improve the crossing at 2nd and Wilson, just off the map here.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on what happens with Ani and the connection to 3rd, we could reduce the traffic on here and make it a little bit different scenario, because that's your alternative. If you're not going to go across that Wilson Bridge picture, it would be up 2nd Street. And then we get into
Comfort again.
Delaware. So that different scenario, right? We're back onto local streets. So this is our existing greenway on Delaware. As a side note, right, we'll have other north-south ones that could be in different routes that are in planning, but we're talking about the east-west route now. We've got marked crossings at Bond, back to Delaware. And then here's where things start to get, start to get interesting again. And we kind of threw this map in here because we're on Delaware, right? And so Delaware comes through, and there's probably some different options. And this is where I think Russ was talking about earlier a little bit. People are going to start to fan out and want to go to different places, and we can build in different designated routes for the tourism, or even people who don't travel by bike a lot. It's nice to pick up a map and go, okay, go this way, and not have to figure out where to go. And eventually people get comfortable and will choose and can go, the local streets are comfortable. So we've got that benefit of a lot of ways to get around.
And this is where the benefit of like the Deschutes River Trail that we want to tie into, and where do we want to tie into that? And it's different if you want to go to, like if you're sitting on Delaware and Broadway, it's different if you want to go to the old mill versus you want to go to downtown. You're going to drop in, you're going to drop into those trail systems at different places, which is fine. And then it also leads you over to the west side if you want to get to OSU or Skyliners or Shevlin Park. The system, we've got a good base system to get everybody there. Now it's just trying to figure out the best way to show them how to get there.
And to create like the spine, right? So this whole conversation is like, what is the main bikeways, right? So that people can branch off of. And there's some options through here too, will come through. But the pink line is the existing greenway that's pretty much built. Needs little tweaks here and there. Just see. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about on this?
No, I think that's just a good example of how many different options there are in the core area of town.
And just while we're at this, as we talk about, this is greenways. Phase 4 is the orange dashed. None of that has been built yet. That's what Russ is referring to, that we could initiate some of the work on phase 4. You can see there, though, when this was planned, this did not factor in a bridge on Hawthorne or any other type of midtown crossing improvements that we'll be back in front of council with here soon. So we feel like we could build the edges of this fairly easily. But we'll have to kind of wait and figure out what the priority is from council in October. Do we want to build a path down Hawthorne and down Franklin, or how these are all going to tie together kind of right in the core area there. So, but that doesn't mean we can't get going on some of this ahead of time. And we know there's going to be crossings. Eventually, all 3 of them are going to be done someday. So it doesn't hurt to build them. So.
But right now, the east-west, that's like 2, 10, 12 of the key routes.
Is kind of outside of this.
It's not, we can always use Franklin, but 2, 10, 12, whatever we're calling it.
Right. Yeah.
South.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be more of what's shown there.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, where you'll parallel the highway and you'll come up that.
It's more,
Wilson.
we're thinking this, right?
Up second on Ani past Crux. Exactly. So that's going to be what we're
Crossing.
yeah. Mhm.
But we also know our north-south is heading up that 6th Street corridor. So, one of the things we'll be looking at is, I think we want to advance that Greenway Phase 4 project, get it moving now. But one of the things we're evaluating is, when you're looking at Franklin and Hawthorne, should we wait until we get more definitive answers on that? But we can look at everything around that we want to move forward with now, because knowing if we got projects in the works and they're going to connect to this spine, we might as well start to move them forward and get them on the ground.
You're never gonna ditch completely Franklin as a way to get across by foot, right?
No, we just want to make sure that we're in alignment with the direction of the priorities from on the crossings and how we're doing that, which is the discussion we'll have in the fall.
You're not wasting anything by making Franklin better.
No.
No, not at all. I mean, as an example, when we started this whole tour, we all went down Franklin to get across 97 in the rail. And that's what a lot of people do, right? So
this is a good example of someone on the route. Where do we go now? Wayfinding.
Brian's lost again.
This is my favorite one though. We've got options, right? So that emphasizes the point that we.
And
just
Robin's
talked
looking
about
at
a
us,
bunch of
just
times.
shaking her head.
She's like, this way,
Just like,
this
wait,
way,
you guys
guys.
decide.
So
If you don't mind,
Oh, yeah.
like jumping back to that one, you can see this is where it kind of gets, it's comfortable, but you're driving through some uncertain areas. And you can see you can't read it, but underneath the speed limit is a neighborhood greenway sign. So that's the signage that exists today. And then there's sharrows on the ground. So something else we're going to evaluate as staff is that enough? Like, obviously wayfinding is going to help, but as you're kind of going and weaving through stuff, there's other concepts out there. Robin shared some stuff that she saw, not that we would paint the entire road green from curb to curb, but there's maybe something more consistent you can do down the road that follows the entire path. So it's just really clear and really obvious that if I just follow this line on the ground, it gets me to exactly where I'm going.
Follow the yellow brick
I think both Ryan and I are right in this picture. So
yeah, for the record.
It's how to get people through the hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
Figure out whether you're going to maternity or, follow the yellow, right? There's stripes on the ground, literally. Keep on the green one, keep on the red, whatever. Yeah.
And this particular route takes you across the Columbia-Gilchrist Bridge. And then here's another example of, so you're coming up the bridge on this paved path through the park, and then you'll get to this point and it kind of turns to sidewalk to street. Like, so if again, you're trying to make it easy to follow the yellow brick road, so to speak, how can we, change this material signing to make it really like, exactly where you're going to go. And in this particular case, the challenge right now, Robin took this picture, almost got a picture. There's some kids on a bike. We just missed like a 3-year-old like zigzagging down to get to the swing set, right? So where are there points where our through bike route is also overlapping with park and walking and other users, and how do we facilitate both those uses? Is it on the same place? Do we work with Parks and Rec to all work one around the other? How's that going to work? So another picture of like, so now we're like, oh, okay, I guess you go this way. And this is part of a neighborhood street safety project, actually working on making this connection a little, or the wayfinding signs. The improvement would be part of this project. And then this is kind of the options, right? So our route might go down Columbia, but if people at this point wanted to go to the old mill, you might take this route here to go by McKay Landing. I think we just include this in here to show the sort of yellow to green to yellow is, the current plan, but there's a couple different options of how this would route. The beauty is this is a gridded area of lower volume local streets. So do we have an option north of Galveston on Hartford? Do we use Elgin? Is it better to keep you going straight on Cumberland and come up? Baltimore work. So there's some, Cumberland's established now up to 15th. So,
and what's interesting, I know Robin alluded to this when we looked at the 6th Street Greenway on the east side, they went through the analysis of all the different streets and they were looking at grades too. And they're like, they chose 6th, not only because it was a good through street, but also it was relatively flat and you didn't have a lot of grade changes in there. So those are all just want to let council know, those are all the different things that will go into consideration as we actually define these final routes.
which is part of what into Cumberland is the choice, even though it might be a little.
I think
And you got the great path right, Skyline.
getting across on 15, like a straight shot across 15th just for a kid, I don't think a kid's going to turn right on 15th there or either way, really. I would just.
Yeah.
Come on, that's a sketchy spot.
Off the,
Yeah.
stay off. Good theme throughout the
I mean, people
discussion.
are always going to use 15th.
Unless we traffic comment or more.
No, I mean bikes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would say, like, if you're talking about this route, whatever we're going to call it, getting a kid off 15th as quickly as possible is probably good.
Well, and so 15th is our Greenway, 14th is the
14th is the
right. And
busy
so you're
one.
saying even 15th because of the traffic now, because at Knoll and the commercial center there, right?
It's not, yeah, it's not so.
Unless that
So we
could
should
be an
probably fix
option
that, because
for
that's a neighborhood
filter.
greenway.
Yeah.
If you feel that way, that's a.
I've only heard
Right.
from like everybody I've heard about on that Greenway, every comment I've gotten from the public has been, you're enticing me to use this with my kids and it's not safe.
Doesn't feel comfortable.
Oh.
Okay. More work to do. This was just a gratuitous shot of a future greenway to close it out because this is Chamberlain as you're going through, but we forget also we live in a beautiful place. So as we're doing wayfinding and these other things and you're navigating people through the neighborhood, like, good.
Spend your time and your money, right?
So that's the last of our slide.
Money view.
Actually, like this is a like
That's
side
what,
note,
that's what we named
right?
it.
That's what.
That's good.
Oh yes.
Is that what it's called?
And really, we were up here because we were scouting out, like there's so many routes, even like I think I explore a lot, right? And Robin's like, well, have you taken the one from Silver Lake back behind the old mill? So we were looking at an option, an offshoot connection to them that we're doing kind of as a CSR, a separate thing to figure out how we can mark and work with the old mill to get other connections. So there's a lot of stuff out there that even, if we're savvy on finding things and we don't see these, how can we help the public to find them? So when we want to pull up the map.
Sure. Why don't we'll now transition, just to give you an overview of what we're thinking on the east-west route. Because we kind of talked about the north-south. It's pretty much the same. The north-south is pretty much what we showed at council. Just, I think that 9th industrial area is probably the one focus area that we'll be looking at, and then how we route it through the core. But that's still holding as the major route.
Got the best map to pull up of all our layers.
I think you're right.
Oh, yeah, I can pull up
Yes.
the one.
So Ryan's doing that. Maybe we can get one question or recommendation from this committee on, just to go back to the north-south route. So remember, Ryan talked about there are two sections on we talked about the 9th Street, but also that 15th south of Reed Market, where the sidewalk was like 5 feet wide, and then we had the path. We just want to kind of get some kind of quick head nods from council in terms of we were originally thinking of maybe packing some of that work with, like a Ferguson roundabout or the Reed Market project. But working with Garrett and Ryan, we can pull that and run that as a separate project to get that moving faster, outside of waiting for these other kind of big vehicular type of projects and, to come in. Just want to gauge council's interest in that because that would probably put that project in the 2 to 3 year mark to get that, we'd probably be in design next year, potentially in the construction season after that to build it. Otherwise, it might be 5 years out before we actually get to it. So we just want to gauge council's interest is it of high enough priority to say, yeah, we should be thinking about moving some of those forward.
So it would be, just to highlight it here from a key routes project standpoint, we've got 1.185 million to build 15th Street from Reed Market to south of King Hezekiah here. So, and we've also got bond money to build the roundabout at 15th and Ferguson. So our initial thoughts, we're gonna package all this together as one thing. But there's so many sub projects you could do. We could split this in many different ways. So we don't need to wait for the rest of the Reed Market work. We don't need to wait for the double laning of 15th and Reed. We can split this off and we can, build that key route work sooner rather than later. And then, what we've got a decent stretch here on Reed Market already. And then Sinclair and Garrett are already going to be building, this stretch here. Like I said, we only have like $3,000 to build this stretch north of Wilson, but we've got another 1.1 million to build this stretch of Wilson or 9th, excuse me. From Wilson to Reed. So between here and here, we've got a little over $2 million to build a low stress key route network right there.
So isn't the bottom part of that or am I too far north that there's a trail right there, right?
So yeah, some of the pictures I showed the other day, this is Caldera High School. So there's a beautiful trail already from Knott Road that comes all the way across, runs past Alpenglow Park, safely crosses at a roundabout here at Murphy and gets you a little bit into what we're talking about right now. But then it necks down from being that separated shared use path. And then now it's a curb type shared use path. And all of a sudden it drops again and it's just a 5-foot sidewalk that's curb tight.
Kind of just north of the canal.
But are you
So
talking about
I'm
the
talking
trail
about
through
the-
Nottingham?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
the
yeah.
Trail through Nottingham, it's still private at this time.
Oh, we can't use it for,
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to be using
So
it.
yeah,
And that's the one that goes along the canal through Nottingham?
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so there is one, you know, it kind of cuts off and you got to ride on some private streets here, but you can hug the canal and it actually comes up out on Reed Market there. So there is a side trail here. And there's even a crossing that it's kind of a funky little bridge. You can cross over that and kind of get into the American Lane area.
Yeah. So how much would it cost to put that into the system, like some sort of agreement?
I think Parks is working with that neighborhood.
Yeah. Trying to bring it in to their fold, yeah, as a parks
I
trail.
mean, I want 15th to be safer, but to me, that trail
Mhm.
should be.
Our superior.
And I think that's there, I think, Robin, there's several like canal ditch rider roads that have always been of interest to the parks and the city to help build out the trail system. It's just ownership and easements and all that haven't figured out that riddle. So that's why from the city system, it's like, well, we need a complete network. What do we have available? We'll continue to pursue opportunities with private property owners, but right now we don't have permission to use their property.
I would rather spend money. I would rather not build new things if we have a trail that we can negotiate on. And maybe that sets us back time wise. And so we should paint on 15th, but the trail's there. And
Yeah, I mean, I know that trail discussion has been in the works for a long
Yeah.
time. And it's really up to the Nottingham Association there on whether or not they want to, I have no idea where parks may be in their discussions. I mean, we can certainly come alongside parks and do what we can to assist in that. And maybe if that's unsuccessful over the next year or two, then we default back to doing 15th, but
then if we did that, are we setting back 15th like another year?
we would be, yeah. If we wait, yeah, then or we just go out and we try to attack 15th now while continuing to work. I mean, you might two routes is better than none. So
Yeah.
I prefer to attack on 15th just so we can get this thing going. I think we're just going to keep growing and growing. And in my mind, this key route is for, first off, the kids, of course, but second off, it's for people that are moving here. People that are here are more than likely, in my estimation, are not going to revert to or move to a bike when they're already doing the car routes. So what we're looking at is the new people moving here, and we're just seeing that grow and grow and grow. So that's my.
I can set up a meeting so we can specifically
let's-
target
let's
that.
see
Let's
where
talk
it may
about
be.
and see if there's some different opportunities.
I don't want to slow down the 15th.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
can do it kind of, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I know people use that route. 'Cause
And I think those are discussions we can have with the park district too, of, seeing if what can we do to help push that conversation just to some type of conclusion.
you had a sign that said, this is the route, people wouldn't be on 15th.
Yeah, well, I guess it depends where people are going.
Is if they're going to the commercial or the small daycare center right there, they're gonna be on 15.
Yeah, if you're going to Larkspur or maybe, but if you're a kid and you're going to Larkspur and it's safe to get up to Reed Market and ride on the sidewalk to the east.
So I just want to, so we just close out this. So it looks like we'll continue to move forward on looking at that 15th and 9th Street, pulling that work and seeing if we can get that moving, pursue other options with the park district, continue those conversations. And then look for alternatives on that 9th north of Wilson section to reroute around the industrial area as part of that key route system. That's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's slowing you down. That's what I would hope is
Yeah.
that you can use some way to get to Coiner. I would picture that.
yeah, you can see we were talking about it. You can see some of the trail systems back here. This is the Bear, the Bear roundabout here we were talking about right at the corner of Juniper and Bend High. So yeah, this is that button hook down Glenwood and then back up. And we're talking about trying to find a way to keep this going north and then you work through Juniper, and then you get over to Sixth.
And what's interesting, just so council's aware, is we've got a private development coming in here called Wildflower. If you remember
really?
the master plan, yeah, and they're really kind of waiting for the city to build the 15th roundabout because that's their main entrance. But with that, then we will get a connection over to the Larkspur Trail. And so then you start to see, yeah, then that other, it's a little more circuitous, but you have a safer route going this way down through here, working, and then you can get back into that Juniper Hawthorne connectivity. But again, we need to wait for some private development things to occur. So that's probably in the 5-year plan that we're looking at to have all that stuff come together.
And Ryan, can you show Counselor Campbell and Counselor Segal like those streets, the kind of Pettigrew, Thomas? Weren't there some safe routes that already exist in there?
They don't
Yeah.
exist, but we've identified them as an awesome opportunity
crossings.
to connect that neighborhood. Matt, is there a green line? Oh, that's on your.
Basically get to the 27th. You don't have to show it. It's just, there's.
Yeah.
Yes,
That's the
there's a
idea.
couple opportunities to get all the way to 27th from there
Mhm.
with signing, striping and sharrows. There's low volume, local streets. There's an opportunity. In order to do that, we need to cross Pettigrew and 27th, but there's 2 spots in somewhat convenient locations that it's wider, that we could do what we've done on, actually better than 15th, just as the traffic separators, but an actual narrow. So it could help the route, and that neighborhood's been asking for improvements. And then, I don't know if we talk about the other ideas. Pettigrew, we're still. looking
Yeah,
at
I mean,
some Purcell,
there's
Pettigrew.
one option thrown out there, just to full transparency. We've got a septic to sewer project that's kind of working its way up Pettigrew. It doesn't do the whole stretch of Pettigrew. It starts here pretty close to Reed Market and probably gets about a third of the way up Pettigrew. But us notifying the public that we're going to be tearing Pettigrew up next year has made them all, understandably so, say, great, you're going to build Pettigrew back with sidewalks and bike lanes and all this other stuff. And I'm like, no, I don't have septic to sewer money. I don't have any transportation money. But one of the ideas you can see here in this bolded red line, going up 27th, this is Route 8 right here, a portion of Route 8. And there's $4.8 million to build Route 8, that portion of it, between Highway 20 and Reed Market. So there is a ton of money set aside to build this stretch, and 27th has plenty of right of way. We got 100 feet. It's an arterial, a lot of room that we could build a nice, safe shared use path off to the side. But you're still on 27th. You're still on a very high speed, high volume road. So this neighborhood association has kind of been pinging us to say, why don't you, instead of building it on 27th, move it over to Pettigrew? You can be on a lower volume, lower speed road. We're going to build a roundabout improvement at the intersection of Pettigrew, Purcell, and Bear Creek right here anyway. But we know that over the years, we've also had a lot of advocacy to build the safe routes on 27th. So there's gaps of sidewalks. I mean, it needs help on 27th. I know I'm not saying we ignore 27th, but yeah, maybe there's something there that we look at. We connect the sidewalk gaps and we do other stuff, but maybe the actual low stress path itself shifts over to Pettigrew. So it's a good question that's been brought up as we've started to initiate the work on the septic to sewer program. And we're going to be tearing up Pettigrew next year because the rest of Route 8 is not funded in any way, shape, or form. The rest of this purple line has absolutely no funding, including the portion of Purcell that's been kind of brought up recently. No money at all set aside to do that work today, but there is money set aside to do this stretch of Route 8 between Reed Market and Highway 20. So again, the TSP is telling us to build it on 27th, but that was a 30,000 foot view, and that's great. I think there may be some opportunities to do a lower stress system, but we got to take a look at that.
But it kind of parlays on the discussion that you're giving us, or comments, your feedback you're giving us today of like, well, yeah, eventually we'll need something and we'll get something on 27th, but in the interim, how do we build these facilities on a lower volume street? And so it's kind of an interesting option.
So I think we can kind of transition more to the east-west.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've got guidance on the north-south. And so the the 21012 reference that we heard, like we shared at the work session the other day, is really, and these were some of the pictures that Janet highlighted. It's really trying to find a way to make this connection where Wilson's gonna end at Second. So the Wilson project's gonna do an intersection improvement at Third and Wilson. We're gonna make that as safe as we possibly can. Again, it's Third Street. It's not easy, but we bought a restaurant.
Yeah,
So we're doing everything we can to make that a safe
take
crossing.
away everything that was inside of it.
But I will say, I mean, if you want an example of how this, of like, even if like the whole Wilson corridor was great and Third Street was stayed in the condition it is, that's a barrier for anyone to use it, because we were all, as we crossed Third Street at Wilson, like no one feels safe doing that. You're in weird spots, the mergings are weird, and that's a great example of like, you could have the best system going to the east and the west, but if you don't have crossing Third Street in a much better form, that system's not going to be used to probably the level that you want it to.
What's our sort of improved crossing for peds is Roosevelt right now? Where's that blinky light?
Yeah, Roosevelt.
Oh, yeah, there's an RRFB down there at Third and Roosevelt.
Yeah, and Roosevelt, I would throw in the same mix as 15th Street as customer complaints. It's not working as well as it needs to for all users.
So what we saw in the photos, Eric coming up and driving across the Wilson Bridge here, maybe some small improvements we can do there. But then this blue line was really, that's that parallel to Highway 97 route that we showed that didn't feel great. But then it kind of gets you and drops you off up here at this intersection by Crux. As we alluded to, there's another master plan development coming in the Core area here. They're going to really help build some of the pathways to get through into the box factory and even kind of connect down into the mill. But we have a project that Garrett's going to be kicking off here pretty soon called Ani East. And it's really to focus on how do we get, there's an existing undercrossing under the highway there right by Crux on Ani. So it's relatively safe. It's grade separated, which is always better. But how do we get folks safely on Ani and kind of around where Sparrow Bakery used to be and, get them south down Second Street and then ultimately over to Third Street. So there's this route here that's really, we're trying to make that connection between the east-west of Wilson and the north-south of the rest of these, the 21012s, naming TBD, right? So yeah, we've got, the good news is there's a decent amount of funding to study Ani East and build something on Ani East. And then we also have money in our our transportation CIP that's not bond related to do intersection improvements at Third and Miller, kind of right where you come out by the car wash there. And so we've got a handful of funding sources already in the mix. But as Janet alluded to, there's an opportunity here. We're going to be doing some improvements here at Second and Wilson, and it will be restricting some turns. If you've driven through that, it's kind of a weird, it backs up from the signal and then you're kind of poking out to see if you can make a turn, and it's not a great intersection. So we're going to be limiting some of those vehicle turning movements. And in doing that, as well as looking at trying to make a better connection, from the box factory Core Pine site over to Third, we really feel like there's going to be a reduction in traffic volume on that stretch of Second. So that would probably be a better long-term option compared to paralleling the highway and waiting for them to, close down the ramp, on and off of the highway there. So we're initiating that work here fairly soon. But yeah, we think that's a great option to kind of get safely under the highway. And then here's the crossing that Janet was showing the pictures of where you got to cross twice to get through here. And then ultimately this brings you down onto Delaware.
But yeah, just so council knows, one of the things we're looking at with some of the development that's going on in that Core Pine area is some potential mitigation on the ODOT system to improve how those ramp terminals are functioning for bike ped. So this is a big combination of bond, key routes, private development. We're chasing grants.
It's a bend.
It's
a bend.
Yep.
So yeah, I'll kind of toggle the greenways layer on and off, but you can see this is the key routes concept. and this is the greenways. So the solid Delaware line is the one that we rode down. It's built today. There's, part of Greenways Phase 4 is to connecting a little bit further to the north. We're talking internally, do you need 2 greenways 2 blocks apart from one another? Or is there something else we can do here? And really, it's kind of coming into the heart of it, as Russ described, is really you get into this greenways area here. And that's when folks are going to kind of start spoking off, like, I'm going to go down to the old mill, or I'm going to go up to downtown, or I'm going to continue straight and cross the bridge like we did. So there's some improvements that we can do through here, but to get some credit for what's already been done and the staff that did that work, everything in this bold blue line has already been built. So we have something in place. We could go market as soon as we decide what wayfinding is going to look like. But we'll just add some supplements to that to get folks up and through Drake Park, across the footbridge, and into some of these other areas. Yeah, I'll pause there. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything into that.
And then we'll kind of that same discussion of marking one big key route through the west side to get out towards Skyliners and up Skyliners.
Yeah, utilizing the existing 15th Street Greenway, maybe making some improvements on it based on the feedback we heard. But yeah, once you get over here, you can make that connection to Skyliners fairly easily, and that's a great existing trail down the Hall Road there.
So that's a lot of information, and I know we talk about this every day, so it makes perfect sense to us because we live it every day, right? We just want to check in with council to say, or one, just are we on the right track? And I can kind of summarize what this means over the next 12 to 18 months, 2 to 5 years, and 5 years plus in terms of how this would all roll. But is this making sense to this point of staff's approach to this?
It is.
Is there any technological wayfinding out there in the world? Do people ride a bike with their phone sitting right here, and then the phone tells them turn right, turn left?
Work with Google.
Would it be Google?
Yeah, even Google, Apple phone now, they just have this new feature where you can choose your route and actually show you the elevation of the different routes, which
Yeah.
if you don't have that electric assist, that's a critical question mark that you're always at. Like, what is the easiest, how much pain do I want to have, going this way or this way?
There's some other ideas out there too, though, wherever the wayfindings may be, you slap a QR code on there that you could just snap it with your phone, and all of a sudden it sends you to the link. And you've got a map right there in front of you on your phone. You don't have to carry a paper copy around.
So we're going to bring in our Office of Performance Management to see how do we get this stuff up to Google, and then we'll be evaluating other options. Like, should we have a map that's at Visit Bend or whatever it is, that people can pull up? Because some people like the technology, some people like the paper map, and just making sure that we've got but it's all the same branding in terms of how that wayfinding system works. And we don't, because right now we really don't have anything. I think the best mapping we have is almost from Bend Bikes on their system. So that's one of the things we really want to do is like, okay, as we can tell, we've got a lot of, we got gaps, but we've got a lot of good infrastructure out there. Let's just let people
know how to get from point A to point B. And if this looks like maybe you don't know what to do, but actually keep going through this weird spot. And that's what really strikes me is we really do have a lot of good pieces in place and good opportunities. Canal trails again, if we can just manage to put them together, and again, that wayfinding.
Yeah.
Telling people how to get, there's a better route this way.
Yeah. And other work, not on the north, south, east, west, that Jen and I have been working on is turning on all of those easy routes. Where are all the trails that we already have?
Yeah.
And what are the pieces that are in between them?
Yeah.
The voters told us to use, intelligent traffic systems or whatever that technological system portion. I think that technological wayfinding is definitely eligible.
But I think that's one thing we want to start really, that's why we wanted to talk to council, because we really want to start scoping this and figuring out, okay, what is this project that we're talking about with the wayfinding? What funding buckets do we have available? What are we trying to achieve? But we thought we should probably have the first conversation with council to make sure that we're tracking in the right direction.
So can you tell us dates and kind of benchmarks?
Yeah, so based off kind of at a high level, this is kind of where we're at. Because one of the things we're talking as a team was where can we be by this time next year in terms of like physical things on the ground? Let's just start there. So we're hoping if based off of this meeting, we'll get that phase 4 of the Greenway project moving. And that should be able to get that designed and hopefully constructed in the next construction season. Wilson obviously will continue. Garrett, I think, I'm not sure. Wilson should be wrapping up sometime next year with all the elements, right? So by, maybe by the fall of this time, maybe a couple months later, the Wilson corridor is complete and that's already moving. We'll start design on that 9th and 15th key route that we talked about up by Reed Market and north, kind of between Wilson and Reed. And then I think the biggest thing for us is getting the RFP out for the wayfinding theming and the design of some key routes and maybe some other elements of the system that makes sense, and hopefully get that on the ground by this time next year. That seems achievable if, just kind of working those two things in concert. And then in terms of like out, the next from like 18 months to the next 36 months, we'd be looking at actually constructing those 9th and 15th key routes. The Butler Market Boyd Acres project will be moving on the north end of town. We'll continue to expand that low stress key route wayfinding system. I imagine once we get it rolling, then we can try to figure out how to keep expanding that system once we know the foundation of that. So that starts to link up some things in there. And then really in the 3 to 5 years, then we're talking about all these other kind of connections and enhancements, whether it's Midtown Crossing, whatever the first kind of solution set is for that. If it's one of those existing crossings, hopefully we're in that time frame of getting something done. On a extension starts to come up in that time frame in conjunction with maybe development going on in the Core Pine area. Hopefully the Wildflower project is then moving forward, and then we can continue that Wilson route, that discussion of the Wilson route further out to the east. And then as always, then like every year, just continue to expand that key route and wayfinding as these improvements come online. It's kind of the high level. That's probably the best way I think we can summarize the approach of what we're thinking right now as a team.
Yeah, as a formality, doing this is great. It's a little bit of a variation from the adopted CIP that was adopted by council on the GeoBond front, because carving out 9th and 15th key routes and building them independently. So it's not a huge variation, but we might need to make some minor adjustments to that we can bring back to you at the new biennium. But if we're going to start spending some money against that, it's a little bit different than what we had programmed originally.
And I think we'll have Garrett and Ryan, they can circle back through TBOC and talk about kind of a little bit of the changes of the CIP there and make sure that everyone's involved in the conversation, but we can, yeah. Make sense?
Yes. Are we considering mobility hubs and linking those to our bike system? Specifically, I'm thinking about, what we're calling wayfinding. We think there's a great opportunity to get more people taking transit, just with more information to them of this is when the bus is going to be here. It's on the way. It's going to take you 15 minutes to get to your next spot. And there's a rental bike for you at that spot.
I think it'll be,
we're all talking to each other.
Yeah, because we want to make sure it's in whatever the theming, because I think the first,
Exactly.
I always think of like that, like
Exactly.
Sydney's 5,000 miles and downtown's half a mile, those classic
That's
signs.
exactly right.
So what do we want on the pole?
Right? Exactly.
And I think as Janet Robert alluded to, that's one of the things we'll be going for. If like, are we going for business district centers? Are we going, even if we don't know what the mobility hubs, the system is designed that once it's there,
Right.
we can incorporate it quickly and get people
Right.
that'll all be in that kind of overall thematic design of the wayfinding system.
So we had this as a goal to be done by July. And I'm concerned that we're not going to be.
We're already late July or a year from last month?
A year from the end of the biennium, the end of your biennium. Yeah. I think we'll have connected systems, north, south, east, west, with hopefully some signage.
So can we, what do we need to do to get the entire group in a place where we have this marked and wayfinded by July?
That's why we need to start now of getting that RFP together to get somebody on board to get this thing moving on the wayfinding effort. That's why we wanted to have this discussion, because it seems like we should be able to get a consultant on board and do that theming package and then get the first set of hopefully signs designed and installed by this time next year.
Okay, so I mean, I'm good with this pace as long as we're meeting,
Yep.
It's key that we have whatever we're calling these, and I think part of it is getting that name done.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they're not really key routes, because they're like 3 key routes that we put together. Or 4. I think we have to have a target of being done with at least the wayfinding. And I would hope that I guess I'm considering the wayfinding to include that paint element or marking element so that you can follow the route.
Mhm.
I mean, I think we should have that done by the end of the biennium.
That's my goal, and we'll shoot for that, because I think especially we want it as a demonstration project of like, this is what we mean by this, key routes.
Could we also maybe at least look a little bit at what Redmond is doing? I know exactly, Janet. I was really pretty frustrating that they did not do that. What are they calling their neighborhood? Greenwood. Quiet streets. And their signs for quiet streets are red, aren't they? I mean, not even the same color. Try and let people know if they're following a bike route or something. So yeah, good luck with that. But that's why you guys make the big bucks. Go talk to Redmond, will you? Get them to convince them that quiet streets is not what we're calling these things. And all across the state, these are neighborhood greenways, and the color is green.
I think all the engineers in the room will probably nod their head of like, this is something you don't want the engineering team doing, is figuring out the naming and signing convention.
Exactly.
For brand. We acknowledge that is not our strong point.
What was this engineer talking about yesterday? A more friendly curve face. Friendly curve. This is not engineering words. Engineers do not use words like more friendly. Engineers want 2.5% more,
That's why I think it's like, there are some really good, and you really want those creative marketing branding folks in the room. It's really important.
And as far out as possible. So people who are in different cities have some idea of how to find them.
Because we would say it's the 210-12 route. What's the problem? It's 210-12.
Exactly, right, exactly. It's a key route. Just get on the key route. You'll be fine. Take it over to the neighborhood greenway until you get on the multi-use path that's going to take you down Highway 20. Follow that on up the old Redmond Highway until you find yourself on a quiet street.
Just to highlight, because I don't want to overlook or make our staff feel like they haven't done a good job. And I know that's not what you're saying, but the goal of having these 2 that we're talking about being done is great. And we're absolutely going to go for that. In our mind, when that goal was set and we had the work done we had, and we were building, like we weren't necessarily piecing them together, because you can look at Murphy and say, we've completed an east-west route on Murphy, done.
I'm not saying that as much as
So, yeah, I just want to recognize the efforts they've put into that, but I totally understand what you're saying.
the organization has moved mountains. This is
Yeah.
all just hyper, extreme expectations about
That's good. Yeah.
safety, which
Yeah.
I basically glean from staff's passion and commitment to this. So
Yeah.
I don't take it that way at all. And I think that you could say, we could mark on the goal dashboard, key routes complete.
Right.
I think that's a success for us.
Right. From a council standpoint, I totally get that.
But I'm totally encouraged. I think this is a good plan. Wayfinding, the elements that are physical wayfinding and the route setting is going to be done by the end of the biennium. So that, by this time next year, it won't be, I don't think anybody expects the service elevation is going to be at the level where it's finished. But as long as, we have the routes are set, the wayfinding's done, and somebody can, who is comfortable can follow that route from start to finish.
Yeah.
Then we can work on getting the service to where we want it to be elevated. And I think it'll be better service than it already is right now because, like you said, you all have already gotten to a spot where, you know, the connections that are making up these key routes are already in much better shape than the surrounding.
I look at it as in the next 12 months, we're sitting on that solid foundation that we can really start to expand it in a more programmatic fashion, right? That's really my goal. So that's really, unless that's what we had on the discussion today. We just wanted to bring everyone up to speed and appreciate Council Broadman joining us yesterday as well on the ride. It was just good. I mean, that's why thought it was good to get the kind of that team together. It's like, let's go ride it because I'm pretty sure it's going to be eye-opening. You're going to
Absolutely.
feel that stress level difference in all these different areas. And so that's all I had for today. Is there any?
Move to adjourn.
Yeah, well, one
Yeah,
other
no.
question, I guess. When do you- so, like,
Retract the motion to adjourn.
when do you think, I mean, realistically, when can the RFP go out for the non-engineering work to be done on this?
Let us go back and huddle, and then we can communicate through Eric and his memo probably to what that timing is going to look like to get that put together. Yeah, but no, I mean, after that, it's like, we'll definitely be trying to frame up that RFP as quickly as we can.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Barb.
Move to adjourn.